Hello and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. This is the freewheelingest podcast and YouTube channel on YouTube or any podcast platform. As you know, I record when I'm able and I try to, I record abundantly and I record when I'm able. Okay. There's no try. As Yoda says, there is no try. There's do or no do, right? Something like that. Much more eloquent. Put much more eloquently, he did. Pardon me. So, a couple of things. First, in case you might see some steam rising in the background here, I don't know if you can notice it on this camera or not, but I recently started using a humidifier, recently meaning like last night, down here in my office that is in the basement of my home. I've had a space heater here for a long time because this is the coldest room in the 3-story structure in which I live. It's a really kind of, very vertically oriented structure, and so the rooms upstairs where we all sleep, very, very warm. In the middle, pretty medium, and down here a little more cold than not. Very simple thermodynamics there, yes. But anyway, I didn't tell you about this. I wasn't trying to explain my whole house thermodynamic situation, but what I wanted to explain is that I do have this humidifier here, and you might see some steam rising in the background. This is not some sort of video effect, and this is not the sign that there's a fire in my home. It is just steam. And I want to tell you folks, if you do not use a humidifier in the wintertime. Now, I don't know where you live, maybe it's still moist, still, maybe the relative humidity in your area during the winter is still high. But gosh, I even remember feeling in New York in the winters, and New York is a pretty humid place overall, Now, growing up in the city, though, you had steam heat, right? And so it was all very moist inside, But my gosh, out here, it's like negative humidity. And I cannot tell you how much it has helped. Not only me, not only my plants, I'm sure. Actually, I know my plants, they're thriving. But I'm sure my pets are also feeling much more comfortable now. I mean, it's like we can all breathe better, where our skin feels better. It's, we're sleeping better. And now we have like a foggy window situation too that's now freezing, and we have like 10 degrees outside with about a foot of snow. So it adds this sort of igloo effect, which is pretty cool. It feels like a little bit like a barrier, between me and the elements, which I like that. So anyway, there's a little public service announcement for you regarding humidifiers. I don't know why I keep wanting to say thermostats, but humidifiers are very, very beneficial for, again, not just you and your breathing and your skin and your hair and everything else, but also for your plants, and I'm sure your animals will appreciate it as well. But I know your plants will. So I want to talk today a couple of things, okay? First, an announcement or a reminder that this Saturday coming up, we have the fourth week. I think it's the fourth week. Wow, we're like a third of the way in now. The fourth week of the 12-week series of workshops that I'm presenting called the Winter Workshop Series. Okay, now each individual thing is on its own. So one does not depend on the other or lead into the other. I'll probably reference because there's some people who are there for all of them, but you could just show up for one of them and still get a lot of benefit. Okay. And so this week, the topic is going to be loving kindness. And I'm really, really excited to share this. And so again, it's as usual, 11:30 a.m. in the Mountain Time Zone in the U.S., which is 10:30 Pacific Time. 12:30 p.m. Central Time Zone. So, and then I'm sorry. And then, where was I? 1:30 on the East Coast. I'm so sorry. I've lived out here for almost 5 years now, and I still just get so turned around with all the time zones. And it's really difficult for me because I as many of you who are listening know, I have people as far away as Turkey and Northern Europe. I speak with people in South America. I speak with people in every time zone of the US. I'm all over the place. And still it happens. Like it just happened just last week where I had somebody I was meeting with and I was like, okay, 2:00 your time or 4:00 your time rather, which is 2:00 my time. What time do you think I showed up for that meeting? 4:00 at my time, 6:00 their time. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. But anyway, I have to be kind about this, right? I have to be kind because even in a situation where, where I screwed up, like I'm, like I messed up. Now that's an opportunity for me to say, you jerk, what's wrong with you? Now, of course, that voice is going to be reflective and echoing, however I was talked to as a child, right? And that's very important to recognize, right? That inner voice that you speak with yourself with, you didn't make that up. You didn't invent that. I'm sorry if you thought you did. And I don't mean to burst your bubble there, but you didn't. I mean, you had a part of it, of course. I mean, we all have part of it. And of course, as we grow older, that voice adapts itself and we start to gain more control and we have more influence on it as we get older, for sure. Absolutely. But you didn't start it. In fact, neither did your parents, because their voice came from somewhere they didn't start. Same thing with your grandparents, same thing with your great-grandparents, all the way down to the people who were living in caves 200,000 years ago. It's all just been handed down. And so, again, while we do at some point take control over it and we take agency over it and we do, become the driving force of it, the basis for where that started was not yours. That was given to you by the way that people talked to you. And also the way that you saw the people who you saw as your models, i.e. your caregivers, you saw them interacting with others. That is also part of your voice that you use, the narrative of your moment-by-moment experience. Now the question becomes, what does that voice sound like? Does that voice say, like when you, when you make a mistake and you show up for a meeting 2 hours late, do you say to yourself, you are such a jerk, you are so stupid, I can't believe you can even breathe? Like I used to say to myself? Or do you say, wow, this was a goofy mistake you made and you have to make amends. I mean, and there probably will be consequences and that's a shame, but that's okay, right? Like we can get through it. It's not that we're going to ignore the consequences. It's not that we're going to say, oh, la-di-da-di-da-di, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. And you might have really let somebody down and you need to acknowledge that and you need to own that and you need to, you hear me, I'm not being soft on myself, right? But I'm not being unkind, right? I'm still infusing everything that I'm saying with kindness. And that's a key to what we're talking about with loving kindness. And this is probably how I'm going to start the practice, the workshop next week on Saturday, is that, the Dalai Lama quote says it perfectly, right? Which is, whenever possible, be kind, says the Dalai Lama. He continues to say, it is always possible. Whenever possible, be kind. It is always possible. And what that means to me, and this is really important to me, especially because with this voice that I've had my whole life and, telling me like, and again, just understanding, just to let you know, as I've shared with you plenty of times before, I grew up in a house where, my father, abandoned us, right? Which let me know that, everything was conditional, right? Like, I had to win his favor, and he also had this brilliant complementary skill of, when something went wrong, right? If a glass was knocked off a table and spilled all over the floor, it wasn't about fixing the problem. It was about making sure that you knew that you effed up. You were stupid, seriously. Like literally the word he used to use, And so, and again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to like air out my dirty laundry here for you, but the idea here is that, that's where my voice came from, right? My voice came from not only just the way that he talked about me, but also what he didn't say to me, right? And the way that he walked out of the life at some point, temporarily, despite being temporary and all that kind of stuff, right? But, when I was 5 and 6 years old, I didn't know it was temporary, right? I didn't have the benefit of the ending of the story. And so in that moment, when I was 5 and 6 years old, that's when this whole thing was forming. You don't look back and then form it. It gets formed moment by moment, just like everything else does in our lives, right? And so again, getting back to the quote, right? Like there's never a time where being unkind is helpful. Like the fact that my father did that all those times, it did nothing for my development. It did nothing to teach me life skills. It did nothing constructive in any way. Nothing. And that's the thing, right? We lose sight of that, right? Because and again, I don't, just so you all understand, I have forgiven my father and my mother for everything that they've done. And this is something I've done for myself, because I have a life to live. I have children of my own who I don't want to repeat the same trauma. Okay. And we're not. That's beautiful, right? But it's important to understand that the place where this came from, and this is the essential message here, right? Is that kindness, if left unintentional, kindness is subject to being canceled, right, by life. And that's what happened with my father, and that's what happens with a lot of people, is that we don't set out to somehow, be unkind. We don't set out to set the intention to be malicious or cruel or mean, right? But what we're doing is, in the absence of the intention of kindness, right, in the absence of saying, I'm going to be kind no matter what, in the absence of that, kindness becomes, voluntary, right? It becomes a variable. And that variable gets pushed out to the side. The time, and again, getting back to my point, I'm sorry that I digress, but the idea is that, it is the dysregulation that my father was experiencing that lost the kindness. Because my father, anybody you talk to would tell you he's a nice guy, a very nice guy. He's friendly, he jokes around, he's generous, he's charitable, all these things. So it's not possible to say that he's a mean person, but when he's pissed off, he's mean, And that is to say that when he goes into his place of dysregulation, what arises from there is a meanness, right? Because it's the absence of kindness. I'll fix my camera here a little bit. Sorry, this is distracting me. I have a history of photography, and so if things are not lined up right, it bothers me. But anyway, the idea then is that if we can practice, if we can cultivate kindness and approach every single situation with the understanding that kindness is appropriate here. Even if somebody's, just shouting in my face, it does not become inappropriate for me to be kind to that person. There's no point at which being kind is going to detrimentally affect my outcome here, right? Because I can be unkind, and they're still going to be mean to me. And I can be kind, and they're going to be mean to me. So why would I want to be kind even to this person who's being mean to me? I'm glad you asked. Because like forgiveness, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, like forgiveness, kindness is for you too. Right? And that's not just to say that we should be kind to ourselves. We should. Absolutely should be kind to ourselves. We should treat ourselves well. We should even in the times where, again, it's that internal voice, right? It's the same thing, right? We should practice that kindness towards ourselves, of course. But what I mean when I say that kindness is for you is what it does for you to be kind. Pardon me, I have to have another glass. What does it do for you to be kind? As Dan Siegel says, integration, referring to integration of the brain and the biological system that we have here, integration made visible, says Dan Siegel, is kindness and compassion. So what that means is that when my father or anyone else in the world does things that are unkind, well, that's a sign of dysregulation. That's a sign that things are not working properly for that person in that moment. It's not necessarily a permanent thing, or it's not necessarily an always condition for them. But in this moment, where they are being unkind and they are lacking any sense of compassion, they are working in disintegration. They are working from reactivity. They are working from the lack of the top-down regulation that is available to all of us, but only if we're able to integrate it in. They're in the stress response. They're flipping their lid. And so that leads us to the next concept of loving kindness, right? That when we set the intention to bring kindness, and again, as we call it in the world of meditation and mindfulness and Buddhism and Hinduism even, I think it's it's called loving kindness, right? And there's the Pali word for loving kindness is called metta, M-E-T-T-A. And that's so oftentimes you'll have a prayer of loving kindness, which is called a metta prayer, right? So may all beings be well and free from suffering and know a life of ease. There you go. That was a metta prayer, and I just made it up. And you can make up your own too. And so this is a practice that goes back 2,500 or more years, folks. All those millions of monks can't all be wrong, right? Over the last 2,500 years, right? So why do we have a practice like that, right? Because again, when we set the intention to infuse our lives with the loving kindness, it's an energy. It's not something that exists in the absence of reactivity or in the absence of meanness or cruelty or cruel intentions or malicious intent. It's not something that just exists in the absence of those things. It is an ever-present energy that infuses everything, gets into every nook and cranny in our lives. And when we do that, when we practice it like that, then what we're doing is we're bringing that integration of our brain and our complex system. We're bringing that integration into the world with us. We're meeting every moment-to-moment experience from a place of beautiful recognition. Beautiful integration and regulation. I think those two words just formed recognition in my mind somehow. Isn't that funny the way the brain works? Now you see here, I could be slamming on the stop button. Oh man, you screwed up. Look at you making such a horrible podcast. You dumb blah, blah, blah. I can't even think of the words nowadays. Believe me, that wasn't always the case. Those words would have flowed. Oh my, would they have flowed. And so that brings us to what the other kind of why a loving kindness practice works the way it does, right? Because when we set the intention, and this applies to any intention, right? But when we set the intention to be kind, to practice loving kindness, which means that in the face of whatever I experience, I want the world and everyone around me, including I want us all to be well. I don't want anybody to suffer. Right? I just want all of us to be happy and to be well. Okay? Now when I take that out, that becomes my energy, right? Like the field of energy of the quantum mechanics, right? And like they say in physics, they say that mass is a condensation of energy, which is what Einstein taught us, right? E equals mc squared is to say that energy is matter just sped up to the speed of the speed of light squared, right? That's all that means, right? So that they're both the same, energy and matter, not different, the same. Right? But one is just a focused a condensation of the other. And that's the way I look at the relationship between loving kindness and compassion. You hear I say compassion because that's the granddaddy and the grandma of the whole thing. Right? That is the key, right? Because again, let me back up. I'm sorry, digress a little bit again. As I practice every day, going out into the world and practicing kindness and loving kindness, wishing for the well-being, saying my metta prayers, but also various other practices that I'll be talking about this Saturday that I can keep doing and over and over and over until I train myself to bring this kindness, to make this kindness my field of energy, right? Well, then what happens that two things are happening, right? Number one, it's keeping me present. Right? Because as I set this intention, and I said this, as I said before, this happens with any intention that we set. When I set the intention to be kind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay attention to whether I'm being kind or not, right? And since that is all happening in the present moment, through these practices, what I'm doing is I'm driving my attention into the present moment. I'm becoming grounded. I'm becoming a part of what's happening rather than separate from what's happening in my life. And it changes everything there, right? And what that does is that widens and deepens my awareness. Where is my attention right now? Am I being kind right now, or am I not being kind right now? That's working a muscle in my brain, which then that creates this sort of, ever-present energy of kindness and heightens the awareness and heightens the meta-awareness, the understanding of where I am, what I'm looking at, all of that. Now, of course, this includes awareness of myself, which is where empathy comes from. When I sense somebody's feelings, like, hey, you're telling me everything's all right, but I can feel something, and to the people who we're close to, we challenge them. We say, I know you're telling me you're all right, but I don't think you are. I need you to tell me what's wrong. I'm here to listen, right? And so what that means, right? That empathy that comes from the presence, right? And plus the kindness, what that equals is this glorious, even a more glorious equation than E equals MC squared, is that now I'm ready for compassion, right? When I notice the suffering in that field of kindness, then my kindness just, it condenses, it solidifies from that field of kindness, it solidifies into compassion. When I see the suffering of another, I'm ready to help. Even if that help is nothing more than wishing for them to be through with their suffering. That, my friends, is the gold, right? That is the stuff. Because what happens then is, again, not only is this good for everyone around you, it is, right? Because you're going to start treating people in a way that is more, again, empathic and really concerned with their well-being, which they're going to love that, okay? And it's going to be good for them, but it's also going to be really good for you, right? Because while you practice the kindness and compassion all the time, as I've told you here before, Dr. Dan Siegel told me directly in a conversation, one-on-one, on a Zoom call just like this, he said that yes, practicing kindness and compassion will promote integration in your brain. and the rest of your system, because your brain is what drives your whole system, right? And so from that place of integration, more kindness and compassion. And from that kindness and compassion, more integration. From that integration, more kindness and compassion. Boom, 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 boom. And that's where you get to the point where, honestly, nothing can, even over the last couple of days, I had two, like, mama jammers of trauma triggers. Two of them, back to back, like one emerging from the other. Either of these would have in the past put me into, at least, like, before mindfulness, would have put me in a funky mood for 4 or 5 days, like an ornery, angry, mean as a rattlesnake kind of mood, no kindness anywhere to be found kind of mood, for 3 or 4 days. But since mindfulness, it would have laid me up in bed for 2 days, no doubt. Just crying, and I went through that. I went through it all. My days off, thankfully, But I came back from it so much quicker, so much less damaging, so much more conscientiously, so much more peacefully. So it's not to say that kindness and compassion are going to make everything okay and no more triggers, no more trauma, no more anything like that. It's not really how it works. No, but you change the relationship to all of that through changing the relationship to the world and reforming that relationship out of the building blocks of kindness and compassion. So this little thing we're doing on Saturday rather. Today's Wednesday, Saturday, which is ironically my Wednesday. It's going to be a 2-hour workshop. Actually, last week was 2.5 hours. I couldn't get him to stop. It was beautiful. I've had about 15 people in each one, 10 to 15 people in each one. It's interactive. Some people keep their cameras off and don't say a word, and that's fine. Some people have their cameras on and are interacting both, verbally and in the chat box and everything else. People are communicating with each other in the chat box. I don't even have anything to do with it. Sounds like a community to me, doesn't it? Well, you're welcome in this community if you'd like to join us. All right. And now, for all of you who are still here, I just came up with another idea. Yes, I am going to add more onto my plate. You're watching it happen here, folks. Even as I have, 8 more, 8 more weeks in my 12-week workshop program, right? I'm going to do something new because this just came to me. Okay, I want to do a 28-day or 33-day or something like that loving kindness challenge. All right. Now, a few years ago, I did one that was a compassion challenge. And I'll admit to you that I think at the time I was maybe a little confused, and I was conflating a little bit of compassion and kindness. And I've evolved a lot since then. And so I am going to, so I'm going to set up a Facebook group and a little mailing list group. And I'll be sending out something in the next couple of days, and I'll say I'm thinking somewhere around Valentine's Day for some reason. Like, maybe this can tie into Valentine's Day somehow, just because it's right here, and just make that sort of the catalyst for the whole thing. But essentially, it'll be like a 30-day kind of deal, and I'll do a little couple-minute video exclusively for this group every day, and I'll send out practices, and we'll have a Facebook group so we can kind of motivate each other. What do you think? You want to join? Let me know. All right. All right, everybody. I'm going to let it go at that today because I have other obligations today, as you know. And so that's all, folks, for today. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Okay. I wish you all well. And think about getting a humidifier. Your guitar will like it too. That's for sure. Anyway, wish you well. Have a great day, everybody.